Welcome to Writers Are the Best Weirdos, the podcast starring me, Julia Roberts. I am a creativity coach, speaker, writer, and a weirdo. Aren't you? We're going to answer a lot of questions about pubbing and promoting and marketing your books, so stay tuned. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today we are talking to Stephanie Mojica about book launches. And before we dive into Stephanie, let me just go read her bio to you so you know who we're talking to. Stephanie Mojica draws on her 17-year tenure as an award-winning journalist with publications such as USA Today, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Virginian Pilot. Most of us have heard of at least one of those, right? Among others. Stephanie's greatest passion is working with entrepreneurs, coaches, and licensed professionals to craft their stories into books that draw clients to them. She has coached dozens of authors through the book writing process. So she has a lot to offer us today, and I can't wait to talk to her about the go-to market strategy that we're gonna try and pin down today. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely. I mean, we want to pick your brain. We want to have a good time, but mostly we want to know, we have a book, what do we do with it? So how do we go to market?
Well, that's a great question. So I am just going to use Amazon as an example. That is not the only way, but it's the most common way. So before you put your book on Amazon, I generally recommend people talking about their book for anywhere from 3 to 12 months before they actually launch it,
Wow.
and people's timelines are different. The 3 to 6 seems to be pretty common. That's, I offer many book related services. And, when I'm coaching clients through writing a book, I have them start talking about it on social media right away. Keeps
like,
them.
what are they saying? What are they saying?
Like, I'm writing a book about such and such.
Okay.
Or it not only helps keep them accountable, because now it's not just themselves and me that they're telling this is happening, but also it's a marketing strategy because it starts to get that demand going. People, it's getting in people's minds. So it's kind of it does, 2 jobs in one, really.
So 3 to 6 months, though, what else are you saying about it? I mean, I'm writing a book. You can do a cover reveal.
Right. I have had some clients do that. And actually, that's one of the things I recommend to a lot of people, to have the cover made early, because it makes that book more real. You've invested in the process as well, because covers aren't free unless you're already a graphic designer.
So right. And they really need to be professionally designed. They can't, unless you're and even if you're a professional designer, unless you're a professional book cover designer, because they need to go figure out the trends right now, like in your genre or in your, so it really needs to be not just well designed, but well placed in what we see for books right now. Does that seem true?
I would agree. Yeah, it's definitely true. And I'll give you an example. So I have a couple graphic designers on my team that do work for me, as well as, my clients when they need it. The lady I would use to do my Instagram carousels, I would not use to do a book cover. It's just two different worlds. And I can explain. Basically, it's, when you're putting up Instagram carousels, you're getting a different audience's attention, so to speak. They're already out there, they're scrolling Instagram, or, if you want to use Facebook, etc. So it's different than having somebody who's in a bookstore per se, whether it's virtual or in person. And it needs to really stand out from all the other books that are on the shelves. And I see so many people use templated book covers, and it's if your book cover looks like everybody else's, people do judge a book by its cover. It's just a sad reality.
But also, if it's a templated book cover, it can't be a very specific like telecommunication, like visual communication of what the heck your book is. It really should strongly and narrowly, to tell what your book really is. Like, why is that cover? Why those things? So it can't be a template that way, because a template is not one size fits all. It's one size fits who, So go ahead.
Exactly. And I mean, I had a client who actually had a professional photo shoot so he could get a picture of him and his family with their backs to the cover, facing a beach. It's like just things like that you can't get from a template. And for a book cover, you can't just have any person. I mean, this was like 7 years ago. So, I mean, technology wasn't as advanced then, but we still have plenty of it. It's not something you can just, take a picture of on your iPhone and put it on a book cover, especially when it's a printed book, because the quality, if you're just doing digital, you might be able to get away with it. I still wouldn't recommend it, but it's just like the quality, it has to be able to be physically printed and look nice.
Yeah, I think that that's one thing that we've printed so little lately that people totally forget that printed quality has to be so many more DPI, dots per inch, than a projected image, right?
It really, really does.
What would you say has to be the DPI
I'm not gonna
at
sit here
least?
and lie to you. I don't know that off the top of my
Oh, okay.
head.
For me,
Um, I
I
think
think
it's
you can.
300 plus, but I don't want
I was
any.
gonna say 600 plus. So we're in the same ballpark. If you're gonna print it, it's gotta be up in that DPI measure. So you know you're getting
Yeah,
saturation and,
don't use 72.
no, and that 72 is fine on a screen, but it's not
Right,
at all fine, even in a, like your printer, much less a professional printer. Yeah, they'll just
right.
call you and say, we can't print this. It's not like you're, you're not gonna, they'll just call and say, this isn't acceptable. We need a different picture.
Or Amazon will reject you. You know what I mean? They'll reject your covers and things for if there's a poor DPI.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they just reject you and you don't quite know why. It can take you a long time to figure that out, as I can
Right.
attest. Right.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. I had one client who somebody had messed up the formatting and we had to go have like a professional formatter do it again because Amazon, even if it's digital only, is just very, very picky nowadays.
it is. And it's not very communicative. It's sort
No,
of just
it's
like
not.
reject, and you're like, I'll try something else. I'll try 52 others, whatever. So it's useful to have professional people in your corner. So tell me, like, we're going to market. What would you say is the top strategy? I love this idea that we're already talking to people about our book for 3 to 6 months. Um, on Goodreads, also, I believe is a really good. People say you can talk if you've been published before. You can also talk about your book for
Right.
3 months or 6 months on Goodreads, but not if it's your first book.
Right. I've seen people use it who didn't have a book before, but it didn't get them a lot of traction. So if you're already
I
on
don't
there
think
or you
Goodreads will let you have a book that's not published if you don't have a different published book.
I
I
don't think
don't,
they will either. Most of
yeah.
my clients are first time authors. I
Hmm.
would say 99% of them. I've maybe worked with a couple of multiple authors, and that was just because they had worked with me before. But
Hmm.
I would say, obviously you want to be talking about on whatever platforms you prefer out of the Facebook to Instagram to LinkedIn. Some podcasts will interview you if you have a publication date,
Hmm.
but generally, you need to be at least scheduling those podcast interviews a few months in advance
Yeah.
because it takes time for people to interview you, accept you. You may need to follow up. The media, I've had people who've had live events launch their book. They need 6 to 12 weeks notice.
Hmm.
It's just
If they're
things
going to
like
send a
that.
photographer an interview, they need some notice, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And I think that's where a lot of people like go wrong. They kind of like just throw the book up there and then start thinking about what they're gonna do. And I've seen so many people who have great books that are just languishing on Amazon or whatever platform they chose because they didn't plan very well in advance.
So what happens if they've launched and they blew their launch? They didn't do much with their launch,
You
or
can
not enough, let's
relaunch.
say. You would
You could
relaunch.
relaunch. I've
Okay.
had people do that. Yeah. I mean, I've had people you could relaunch by maybe adding an Audible edition, or if you didn't go digital, add a digital edition. Or
Hmm.
I had one gentleman who last year decided he was going to update his book because there was some new information about Alzheimer's disease, that he hadn't included in his first edition. So depending on what book you have, it could be like an update or you could just add another platform and then you can relaunch that book. But if you can't relaunch your book, maybe you already put everything that out there, you could still try to get some attention for it. It's just going to be harder to get newspapers and podcasts, especially newspapers, to interview because they want that newsworthiness. So when
right?
it's not new, unless you win an award or a grant or something, believe me, as journalists for a long time, it's really hard to get into newspaper with an old book.
Okay, um, so we relaunch, let's say we pick, and it's kind of wise in the first place to go ebook 3 months, paperback 3 months, audio 3 months, so that you're always launching. Does that seem
That's
true?
true
Or,
too.
yeah,
I've had clients do it that way. A lot of them are just ready to get it all out there. So a lot of them will do it once, plus a lot of them are busy attorneys, entrepreneurs, and they don't want to be launched all the time because it's exhausting. So it
yeah,
just really depends on the person and their resources. I've had people who can afford to hire, people to work with them all the time on multiple launches. So it's really individual. I think it's a great strategy to do it that way, but it's not going to be feasible for everybody.
okay. So what do I do when I'm launching? How do I get attention? How do I make sure my book is coming,
Right.
having a good launch?
Well, you definitely need to talk about social media. And, I know social media can be overrated, it can be hit or miss, but it's just one of those things that people need to do. A Facebook author or book page is a really good strategy that I've used with
Mhm.
several of my clients because it's dedicated to that book. So you can get, buzz going around it. you know, Podcasts are very, very powerful. I've had people sell like 400 books from one podcast interview because generally you're asking people to spend anywhere from most people I work with charge $9.99 plus for their book, but I've had some who charge $4.99. So it's a much less risky investment than trying to sell even your digital course, let alone your
Mhm.
coaching program. So,
Mhm.
the podcast interviews, the newspaper interviews, and not just where you live now, but where you're from originally.
Mhm.
I've had people get newspaper interviews in multiple states. I've had people end up on TV. It just depends on who you are and what you
Mhm.
want. Like some people
And
don't
what
want to
your
be on
book is.
TV.
And what
Yeah,
your
I
book is.
mean,
Your book could be
mhm,
TV worthy or not. From the point of view, and that's not like a judgment of you, but some things are graphic and fun and some things aren't. TV is a visual medium. You know what I'm saying?
right,
So when I had a book called RV There Yet, and it was 5 voices, 5 journals of me and my kids and my husband on this RV trip, and my husband stayed home and was worried. That's his journal. And I was on the
right,
road with 3 kids, and their journals were like, Mom is so mean. That got
right,
TV because I could pull the
right,
RV into their studio, and I had 3 little kids
right,
who were willing to be hammy and funny and whatever. I got
right.
TV Maine to Florida, but that had a graphic element that they liked. By the same token, I had pulled my RV into the studio, those very big doors, once, and in New York, and then got bumped for real news, and then did it the next day and got bumped for real news. And we
Right,
went in the third day
exactly.
and got bumped, and we just gave up because you can't, getting 3 kids into hair and makeup, et cetera, and get your RV back in there. It was a
Right,
lot.
exactly.
So you also get bumped, and that's, but if you have something
Right,
graphic or
right.
visual, you're you'll get TV better.
Right. And sometimes it's not just about even your book. It's like some kind of connection. Like I had a client who was a son of a former governor that was much beloved in his state of birth. So he was able to get on TV a lot easier. He also had, this was his religion, this is his faith. He had a powerful testimony about overcome religion. So some of the religious TV shows wanted him. And then I had another client whose daughter tragically committed suicide. So it really depends. If you're writing a memoir and there's compelling things like that, then you're gonna have a stronger chance of getting on TV. If you're a lawyer who's won a lot of personal injury cases, again, you might have a stronger chance of getting on TV. I don't see a lot of people getting on TV for fiction or poetry unless they wind up on Oprah's book club, like one of my professors from college. But I don't
But they
want
can
anybody to
get
think
good
it can't
radio. They can
happen.
get
Yeah, I can
NPR
get
interviews,
radio
great
is great.
radio. Yeah.
And I mean, magazines, newspapers, podcasts. So, there was one client that wanted to get on TV and she was upset nobody was putting on TV. And I had explained to her it had nothing to do with her book, even though it kind of did. You know what I mean?
Well, it
It's just
does, but
it's
it's
not a
not a
personal,
commentary on who
it's
you
not
are.
a it's not a personal attack, is what I'm trying to get
Right.
across.
It's not
It's just
commentary on who you are. It's a commentary on how this fits with what the TV producers are looking for. You know.
right. And they always have but so much time, especially nowadays with all the bad news out there in the world.
Yes, we got bumped. I don't know. This was in the summer of '04. Who knows what was going on, but I know we just kept being bumped 3 days in a row in the summer of 2004, you know, or maybe it
Right.
was
So, I mean,
2005. I don't remember exactly when we were on
I
tour because
mean,
it
now
wasn't.
we've got snow in Los Angeles, and just different things are just changing. So it's
Yeah, people
definitely
are
easier
glued
in
to the,
some
yeah.
ways get on TV because they do a lot of Zoom and stuff now, but it's also
Hmm.
harder in other ways because there's so much news.
Yeah, I think whenever this was '05, I don't remember, but we had to travel, we had to show up at
Right.
the, yeah, and we showed up in Boston and Maine and, Buffalo, New York. And, we showed up at each of these little studios and did our little thing. But we traveled from Maine to Florida and did, I don't know, 20 different interviews on the way. But,
Yeah, that was one of my clients too. He traveled from Kentucky to Virginia about 7 years ago to be on the 700 Club. So yeah, there's definitely, and it's also that makes it a lot more people are trying to get on TV because they know they don't have to travel. So there's a lot
I
more
mean, I
competition.
think you're a lot less interesting on Zoom. You better have a lot of expertise if you want to deliver on
Right.
Zoom. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're just doing a fluff fun piece, Zoom doesn't deliver that,
Right. That's
Yeah.
true.
Anyway, so okay, so um we talked about like 3 to 6 months of talking beforehand and social media and getting all your formatting right and all those things. But what what makes it so that my book doesn't just go out and sit? What makes it so that my book sings when it comes out?
That's a great question. So I hate to say this, but it has a lot more to do with the author singing than anything else. I've seen some really terrible books do amazing because they had the right marketing behind them. And I've seen some really amazing books do terribly because the person was shy. Maybe they felt imposter syndrome or they just didn't have the know-how. So it's like talking about it, and there's a fine line. You don't want to be one of those people that's the only thing you talk about because then people are just going to tune out. But it's something you have to do. I mean, I've had people whose own family members didn't know that they had written a book. So it's like, I think a lot of writers, I know we're on a writers or weirdo show, can be like, lean more toward being introverted sometimes. And I think that can be a disadvantage when it comes to our
I
launches
think
and
it's almost
marketing.
50-50. I mean, we all have to spend a lot of time alone, so there has to be a
Yes.
little introversion. I mean,
Right. Yeah, I'm
but I mean,
ambiverted.
I'm an ambivert. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I'm definitely an ambivert. I love being with people and then shut up. I need time alone.
Right, that's pretty much how I am. So it's like, and I think a lot of writers also are as well. But I've seen some who are really introverted, and it's like they would just rather sit behind a computer. And you can sit behind a computer, especially in this, with the pandemic, everything going on. But it's
Mhm.
like when if you're just going to use social media, just make sure you're giving people things they can use right away. I had one client who is using like different, tips for children because she's writing, some things for children. So she's giving different tips for children. And then every couple posts, she'll mention her book that's coming up. So it's just you have to like put yourself out there.
Yeah, you do. But I think, and so when I brought my most recent book out, Right Without the Fight, I literally had 75-ish people who said that they would write a review if I sent them an ARC, an advanced reader's copy. So I
Right.
sent them my PDF, and because the algorithm is that if you get 25 reviews in the first 3 days, it'll continue to treat you as if possibly you're a celebrity. They don't know until, it dies down, right?
Right,
So,
right.
right. So the algorithm will keep pushing you at least for those few days until it figures it out if you continue to get reviews. So if you set it up in advance that 75 people say they'll do a review, at least 25 will. It does take that kind of collapsing. because people are busy, they forget, they can't get to
Right.
it. It's a short window, 3 days, so I had 75 people. I believe I ended up with 22 reviews,
Right.
and then you have to call your mom, to fill out those, because it's an algorithm, man. You have to get that
Right.
25. 22 seems good, but it's not good enough. Right.
Right.
Right. So 25 reviews will trick the algorithm for a period of time in three
Okay,
days.
that's good
Yeah.
to know. I didn't know that was the exact number, but yeah, definitely getting the reviews is important.
And
The
continuing to, if
yeah,
you keep going
continuing.
and you have over 100 reviews, your book will continue to have life. Does that seem true?
Yes, I believe that's true because I've had clients who've done their books 5, 7, 10 years ago, and they still get a lot of reviews and they're still selling pretty well. So it's kind of like anything else. It's like if there's not new activity, then it just kind of languishes, you
And new
know.
activity being the reviews.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, people are still engaging with this, so it's still relevant.
hmm The podcast will be back in less than a minute. Writers, does this ever happen to you? You can't write, though you try and try. Whoa! Writer's block just knocks you down. It doesn't have to be so flinging hard. Join the Mighty Writers Club. We write together up to 5 days a week. We have a coaching and creativity training 2 times a month. You get your writing done in a community. We're with you all the way. Act now. Join us before you end up like her. Be mighty. The Mighty Writers Club. Find us at go.decodingcreativity.com/mighty. I mean, that's true of even a bookstore. You get like 6 weeks on a bookstore shelf unless people are buying it. They don't keep your book
Right.
after that. They pulp it.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So especially for the Amazon algorithm, it's like getting those reviews and people voting. And I guess that's why you see a lot of people trying to buy reviews, which I don't recommend because there's always ways for people to find out that you bought the review. And that could jeopardize your entire Amazon author account or just your reputation in general. But I do see people who are trying to buy book reviews.
I don't even know how you would buy a book review.
You go to like a site like Upwork where you hire freelancers to do like freelance writing gigs and stuff, or like people per hour or Google or some other sites, and you like pay somebody $5 to write a review about your book. I see those jobs all the time.
Wow. Still, I mean, I guess they're not going to read your book, but lots of reviewers didn't read your book, especially if they acted in the first 3 days. They
Right,
may or may not have finished your book.
right.
But Amazon wants them to be a buyer.
No, they what they do is they pay you to like buy the book. They'll pay you the price to buy the book and then pay you an extra $5 to write the review.
Oh, because you
I've
have
seen a
to.
lot of
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen a lot of people using that recently, and
Wow.
I think it's unethical, and
Right? I think
it's against the terms of service of Amazon,
I
and
was going to say, more
it's
importantly, I think it's against terms and services, and then you never
right
know. These guys
what
could
the
cut you off.
consequences are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so
I
I
mean, we've
wouldn't
seen
do it.
consequences on Facebook and Twitter, and they do
Mhm.
have they do have ways if you have terms and conditions. Sometimes you just write the most inane thing on Facebook and they just cancel you for 3 days. And if
I
you happen to
know,
be in the middle of a launch or something, that's really consequential.
right,
So if your author account were canceled for however long, it would be really consequential because you
right,
can launch a book without Amazon, but it's
right.
pretty
You can.
hard.
No, I've had people do it and they regretted not using Amazon, but
Yeah,
some people are just morally opposed to Amazon, which I can
sure.
respect.
But I think as a writer, I mean, you can be morally
Yeah, you
opposed
have
to
to
for
let
lots
go of
of
your
reasons.
feelings about, yeah, you have to let go of your whatever feelings
Yeah,
you
there
have
is no
about the
other.
people
It is
behind it.
right. It's the
Mhm.
only game in town. I mean,
It really is to me.
that you can afford. Like so you are going to maybe go through a wholesaler and get into bookstores or whatever, but those are going to be 2 and 3 at a time. It's going to be a
Mhm.
lot less than buying a platform like Amazon, which you don't even have to pay for, but using a platform that already exists and already attracts millions of people is is what I mean. That's the name of the game. So you can't mess with that. You can't put your account at risk and things. No, if
No, you
somebody,
really
I've had
can't.
people who wrote me a review and then they couldn't use it because they hadn't bought in 6 months. I
Oh,
hadn't bought
geez.
anything from Amazon in 6 months. I was like, more power to you, baby. But but
Mhm.
in that case, you just ask them to put it on Goodreads.
Right. I mean, and I definitely would recommend, like I said, I mainly use Goodreads for just personal interest, but I would definitely recommend having people put it on Goodreads. Google has reviews. So it's not like I don't want to sound like
And
I
you can ask
drink
people to put it on their TBR
the right.
list. Yeah.
People put Facebook reviews on author pages. You know, obviously Amazon's going to probably have the most power, but if
Right.
you have people,
Because it's
especially
right at the
people who are
point of
really,
purchase.
if
It's
people are
right as
really
I'm
invested
deciding.
with you.
It's
Mhm.
right as I'm deciding whether or not to buy that. Those other things are as I'm deciding
Right,
whether or not to go to Amazon. You know what I mean? So it's at least one step removed from the
right,
actual purchase. Right.
right. So I would definitely recommend folks on Amazon because unless they're your family or your close friends, they're not going to want to go put it on like 5 sites.
Right. And even then, if they have your last name, the value of that is pretty slim, you know.
Right.
But anyway. Okay. So what about pre-sales? Do you do pre-sales or pre-order?
Most of my clients that I've worked with do not do pre-sales or pre-order, so I only have a little bit of expertise in that. I think there are definitely pros and cons of it. Obviously the pro is that that's gonna make that book come out when it's supposed to come out. I think like pre-sales and pre-orders are most effective when people have their own website that's extremely active. It has a lot of traffic and they're not just selling on Amazon. But in my
Hmm.
experience, a lot of people are not dealing with that.
So I think Goodreads can run a pre-order and
I
a
think they
giveaway.
can too.
Yeah.
I
And I
think
think,
so too.
and I think they can do a giveaway when your thing first comes out.
Yeah, I
That's what
mean,
you
I've
can
had
also do that
people,
after the launch. That can be a little boost.
yeah, I've had people like, have the book on sale for 99 cents for the first like 3 days, so they can get that clout and that best-selling author status. And that's a strategy that more people that I work with use
Hmm.
rather than doing the pre-sale or pre-order.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. So so my book comes out. I've had a book. People think they're going to have a book party, which, especially with the pandemic, you're not likely to, like a book launch party or whatever. With the pandemic, you're less likely to.
Right.
But you can have one on Zoom if you want. But I'm just saying the world has changed, and that just isn't what it
Yes.
used to be. That used to be quite a high end sort of thing that happened in
Oh
New
yeah,
York, and
I've been to a bunch. I mean, there was one
mhm.
in
And
Kentucky
the
where
press
like
would
the
be
guy,
there.
yeah, and
Hmm.
he like sold like $4,000 of books in one night. And there's this, yeah, I think with the pandemic, I see people are still having them, but I'm seeing the rooms. There's a lot fewer people there. I think people are still very nervous about being in crowds.
Yeah, I think crowds in particular, but also just you know, the publishers are not budgeting for that anymore, those high-end posh things. And if you're doing it
No,
for yourself, you have to decide whether or not it's going to pan out just on the return of
right,
investment, and or whether or not press will come, because that's really one of the reasons you have a big launch party. You sell a
right,
lot of books and press comes, you know.
right.
So
It just depends on where you're living. If you're living in New York City, it's going to be a lot harder to get the press to come out there than if you're living like, in South, done a lot of things in Lexington, Kentucky, where I used to live. So it's just going to depend on the part of the country or the world that you're in too.
mhm. Okay, that's interesting. I always live in an A county. I don't ever live in a C and D county. I mean, I lived in New York, and now I'm out in LA. I just almost have always been in a big city, a big urban out.
There's also a lot fewer journalists now too. Newspapers and TV stations have cut staffing, so it's just things have changed
And they're
somewhat. If you
leaving
could
their
have,
desks a lot less.
yeah,
Yeah,
they are.
they're doing much more digitally, just like the rest of us. So they're not showing up at things as much as they used to.
So
Hmm.
if you could have a live book launch party, I would definitely still recommend it, but I would just, be careful of the expectations and how
Okay.
much you invest.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think some of us, especially if you're like had this fantasy of publishing, book launch and then book tour. You know what I mean? Like this idea of being treated like an author, like going on book
Right.
tour. What about a book tour for like a self-published or an indie published book?
So
Is
I've
that
had a
possible?
lot of people do this. Yeah, it's definitely possible. That's another reason that you go on Amazon, because it could be a lot easier for you to get your author copies, which are at cost, or for the bookstore to get copies. So you could definitely still have a book tour. Um, Actually, this is generally easier. Like I've worked with a lot of people that live in New York, because there's apparently I've been in New York a few times, but I haven't been to all their bookstores. Obviously, there's a
Sure.
lot more
You couldn't
independent
possibly.
bookstores in New
Mhm.
York. So it
But
just
even a
really
Barnes and
depends.
Noble, that might seem daunting, but I've been into Barnes and Nobles and asked to see the talent outreach was the title, I think, and they,
Right,
talked to me about getting a book, and then you have to schedule it, obviously, and then they hope you'll put out the
right,
word. They'll put out a sign, but they're not
right.
gonna spend much on bringing people in.
Right. So I think anything you do in person and, bookstores, and you can also do stuff at literacy centers. I've had people do things at literacy centers, depending on what your book is about. So, getting to a school system can be tricky, but I've had like some people who wrote books for children wind up getting it into the school system. So
Mhm.
really it just depends on you, your goals, your budget, and the type
You
of book
talked
that you
about
have.
faith-based. I mean, I think a lot of people get in church basement like book
Yes,
clubs and
yes.
gatherings. And I mean, that you really do have to sync up your interest with the people who share that interest, and then they'll be interested in you. It'll sync it up.
Yeah, I've worked with people from every religion imaginable, and it's like it doesn't matter what the religion is. It's like they want to like support their own. So it's like,
And their
if you
messaging.
yeah, if you have like ties to like, a church, synagogue, temple, mosque, definitely take
Women's
advantage of
clubs
that.
at the women's clubs at those churches, host things, host luncheons, all sorts of things. Women's clubs in general host lunches and speakers, and so do
Right.
but I mean, speaking is now another thing, but you can speak about your book or do a reading, but a reading is easier if you're not a speaker. But if you have a nonfiction book with a message, you can do a talk on that subject any number of places, right?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I've had
And
some people
so
who did it the other way around. They were speakers and then they wrote the book, because they found it was easier to get booked as a speaker if they had a book to sell in the back of the room.
it's hard to be a speaker without something on topic. This is my fourth book, but my other books weren't on topic,
Oh,
so
okay.
and that's not what they want. They want to be able to sell the book that takes your speech further, so
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very individualized. There are just myriad options. I mean, if you don't want to go out in person for whatever reason, there's still a lot you can do online. It just can
Mm-hmm.
be a little harder sometimes because people's attention, there's just so much competition for their attention online. I think the best strategy is to combine both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, so what about 6 months after your launch? What can you do?
6 months after your launch, I mean, you should still be talking about. Obviously, you're not going to talk about it as much because, again, you don't want to burn your audience out. But I would say mention it at least once a week. It depends on your posting schedule. If you want to still only post on something like Facebook once a week, then you're not going to talk about your book every week. You might want to talk about it once a month, but just, make sure that the link is like if you're on a podcast or, on your website, or if you're writing blogs, just make sure that link in a like couple of sentences about, the book and the benefits it brings to the reader are in
Mm-hmm.
all of your content. Just,
Mm-hmm.
just
Wait,
just
that was interesting. You said not just the book link, but the benefits it brings the reader.
yes,
So,
yes, like yeah, because if you just throw a book link and a title down, it's not really gonna mean anything to
so what would the
people. It's
benefits likely be? How many words are we talking? 3 bullet
uh
points? A paragraph?
yeah, I would say it depends. If it's your own website, I would do like 2 to 3 sentences. If it's like somebody else's website, you might have like a limitation of 1 or 2 sentences. So
But they have
just,
that little thing when if you write an article for somebody, they'll give you that little author box, and you can put a couple sentences in that.
right,
Julia Roberts is the author of Right Without the
right.
Fight, yeah.
Right. So if you have the room, and everybody's different, like I've written for entrepreneur.com and they have like specific like length you could have. And some people, it's like they only want like certain kinds of links. Like they would be fine with the Amazon link, but they wouldn't be fine with the link to like some random publisher. So it just really depends. But I would definitely have a couple of versions of it ready. If say you were writing a business book, because a lot of people I work with, they write a book about their business expertise. You could say this book um explains how you can, I'm just gonna make something up off the top of my head,
Sure.
how you can get more writing done in less time by using 3 specific strategies, just something like that.
Because
Just
that like is
mention
so,
what's in
yeah.
it for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, just even what you just said, it gets so quickly to the benefit and how it's presented, the 3 specific strategies that, if that's something you want, you'll pick
Right.
it up or you'll look at it at least. Okay. Well, I love this.
But
I think people worry about how to get out in public and how to get ahead of the launch and be, I mean, there's a lot of talk about like the categories and things so that you can debut at #1 or pick the categories that,
right.
there's a lot of talk in the world about that. But
Oh, there
that,
is.
yeah, but putting a pin in that, which is an expertise in and of itself, the next thing is the next thing is really just as we're talking about social media, tell your friends, have a party, show, try and get into bookstores or readings, podcasts. Podcasts I think are really big. There's
They are.
there's people who write blogs about books. Those tend to be fiction though, not
Right.
nonfiction. Um,
Yeah, I've seen blog tours, but that was mainly for fiction and sometimes poetry.
yeah, I would think a blog tour or you could do a blog carnival where you invite 10 people to blog on your site, and
Right, you could
then
do that.
because then those other 9 people are going to tell everybody to come read, and your book is being represented in your blog portion, so at least a
Exactly.
lot of new faces, a lot of new, yeah. So anyway, okay, well, I really appreciate this. I feel
So this
I
has
mean,
been a
I think
great
it lifts some.
conversation.
Thank you. I think it lifts some of the dread one you might have about how to go to public, how to go to market. Hmm.
Definitely. I think, it's like there's things you can do on your own. There's things that sometimes may need support around. And I'm just happy to be available as a resource for folks because there's a lot of books out there that aren't getting the attention they deserve.
Ah, so many, even mine. Because we all think they deserve, we're all like the spoiled baby. Look at me, look at me, look at my
Well,
book.
I'm
Hey,
writing a new
mom.
book right now about writing for attorneys, and I'm going to start talking on my social media about this week and follow my own advice. So,
There you go. And she's talking about it on a podcast right now.
right, exactly.
I'm going to say gold star. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you.
expertise. It really helps us all a lot and feels great to have some ideas before we get into that, panic. You ever heard of the word thorn? It's where a bunny or a deer gets into a,
No, I haven't heard of that one.
so that's a word that a thorn is a bunny or a deer or something gets freezes in a bad
Oh,
situation.
okay.
So,
Ooh.
we're all in a thorn until we get a little bit of information and ideas and, you know, anyway, so we can come out of our thorn and, dash into the woods a little or something. That's what a bunny would do. But at any rate, okay. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Hey, thanks for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell your friends. What did you learn today? What was your takeaway? What are you going to do today? Put it in the comments. We all want to know. Meanwhile, get my book, Write Without the Fight. You want to master your creative process so you can write with more ease and satisfaction. The links are all in the description box. Join us, because writers are the best weirdos.